Imagine you cook dinner for a few friends. You spend all afternoon preparing. You watch 3 recipe videos. You buy the fancy mushrooms. You even use the knife technique that makes you feel like a suspiciously calm person on a cooking show. And then the meal turns out amazing. Everyone compliments it. Your brain immediately says, "Of course, I have taste. I am basically 1 apron away from opening a restaurant." Now imagine the exact opposite. The chicken is dry. The sauce tastes like it was emotionally abandoned. One friend says, "No, it's good," in the same voice people use at funerals. Suddenly your explanation changes. The oven was weird. The recipe was unclear. The chicken itself had a bad attitude. Same person, same kitchen, same level of confidence. But when the outcome is good, you become the cause. When the outcome is bad, the situation becomes the cause. That little mental trick has a name: self-serving bias. It is the tendency to attribute our successes to our character, ability, and effort, while attributing our failures to bad luck, unfair circumstances, or other people. In simple terms, when you win, it was you. When you lose, it was the weather. This bias is funny when it happens in a kitchen. It is less funny when it happens in your career, your relationships, your health, your money, your parenting, your creativity, and your ability to grow. Because self-serving bias does not just protect your feelings, it protects your current identity from useful information. And sometimes the information that hurts your ego is exactly the information that could change your life. Self-serving bias is not random. Your mind is not stupid. It is trying to protect something: your self-image. Most people do not walk around thinking, "I am irrational, selfish, inconsistent, and occasionally ridiculous." Even if that would be a painfully accurate LinkedIn headline for the entire human species. Instead, we carry a basic story. I am a decent person. I am competent. I usually have good reasons. I am trying. This story is not bad. In fact, you need some version of it to function. If every mistake made you conclude that you were worthless, you would collapse under the weight of ordinary life. So the mind develops a protective system. Think of self-serving bias as your ego's public relations department. When something goes well, the PR team sends out a press release. This success demonstrates strong leadership, strategic thinking, and personal excellence. When something goes badly, the same PR team says, "Due to unexpected external conditions, temporary market volatility, and several unnamed operational factors, responsibility cannot be determined at this time." This is why the bias feels so natural. It is not experienced as lying. It feels like context. When you succeed, your effort is obvious to you. You remember the hours. You remember the stress. You remember the small private sacrifices no one saw. So credit feels fair. When you fail, the obstacles are obvious to you. You remember the bad timing, the unclear instructions, the unreasonable person, the weird traffic, the fact that Mercury was probably doing something suspicious. So blame feels fair too. The problem is not that these explanations are always false. Sometimes you did work hard. Sometimes the situation really was unfair. The problem is the pattern. If your wins are always internal and your losses are always external, you are not analyzing reality. You are protecting a story. You can see self-serving bias clearly in school. A student gets an A. They say, "I studied hard. I understood the material. I am good at this." The same student gets a bad grade. Suddenly the test was unfair. The professor was unclear. The room was too cold. The questions were worded weirdly. The pencil had negative energy. Now, some of that may be true. Tests can be unfair. Teachers can be unclear. Rooms can be so cold you start writing like a Victorian orphan. But notice what the mind is doing. It is selecting the explanation that protects identity. Good grade. This shows what I am capable of. Bad grade. This does not count. The same thing happens at work. If your project succeeds, you say, I led the strategy well. If it fails, you say, leadership changed the scope. The timeline was unrealistic. The team did not communicate. Again, may be true. But if this is always the pattern, you never learn the part that belongs to you. And growth usually hides in the part that belongs to you. That is the dangerous side of this bias. It does not simply make you arrogant. It makes you selectively unavailable to feedback. You become extremely interested in context when context protects you, and strangely uninterested in context when context would challenge your self-image. Self-serving bias survives because it has emotional benefits. It reduces shame. It preserves confidence. It lets you keep moving after failure. There is a reason people use it. If you apply for a job and get rejected, it may be useful to think, maybe the role was not the right fit, rather than, I am permanently unemployable and should live under a blanket. The first thought may help you apply again. The second thought may turn your afternoon into a documentary about despair. So we should be fair. Self-serving bias is not pure stupidity. It is a self-esteem repair mechanism. The problem begins when the repair mechanism becomes your entire operating system. Imagine your car has a warning light. The light turns on. Instead of checking the engine, you put a sticker over the dashboard that says, "The car is brave." Very supportive, not very useful. Self-serving bias is often that sticker. It helps you feel better, but it may prevent you from opening the hood. And if you never open the hood, the same problem returns. Different exam, different relationship, different boss, different business idea, same pattern. You protect your ego so well that your life cannot give you instruction. Self-serving bias becomes especially messy in relationships. Because relationships are basically two people with different autobiographies trying to agree on one shared reality. You forget to reply to a message. Your explanation, I was busy. I had a stressful day. I meant to respond. They forget to reply. Your explanation, they are inconsiderate. They do not value me. They clearly had time to post a picture of soup. When you are short-tempered, you were overwhelmed. When they are short-tempered, they were disrespectful. When you need space, you are regulating your nervous system. When they need space, they are emotionally unavailable. It is amazing how quickly psychology becomes weaponized when it helps our side. The bias makes your own behavior feel circumstantial and their behavior feel revealing. In conflict, this creates a trap. Each person thinks, my mistake had a context. Your mistake revealed your character. Now, both people feel morally correct. And when both people feel morally correct, curiosity disappears. The conversation becomes a courtroom. Everyone is presenting evidence. No one is learning anything. This is why reducing self-serving bias is not about becoming self-blaming. It is about becoming more symmetrical. If you want your context considered, practice considering theirs. If you want your intentions included, practice including theirs. That does not mean accepting bad behavior. It means refusing to use two different standards, one generous standard for yourself and one courtroom standard for everyone else. There is a subtle difference between confidence and self-deception. Confidence says, I can face the truth and still be okay. Self-deception says, I can only be okay if this is not my fault. That distinction matters. A confident person can say, I did some things well and I also handled that badly. A fragile ego needs a cleaner story. I did everything right. They were impossible. The second story feels stronger, but it is actually weaker, because if your self-esteem depends on never being partly responsible, then reality becomes dangerous. Feedback becomes an attack. Correction becomes humiliation. Other people's disappointment becomes evidence that they are unfair. And slowly, you become harder to teach. This is one of the most expensive psychological states in the world, being too proud to receive the information that would make you better. The irony is that the people who grow fastest are not the people who blame themselves for everything. They are the people who can separate responsibility from identity. They can say, "That was my mistake," without adding, "Therefore, I am a terrible person." They can say, "That was not entirely my fault," without adding, "Therefore, I have nothing to learn." That middle path is maturity. So how do you correct self-serving bias without becoming harsh toward yourself? Use a simple process called the responsibility audit. It has 4 questions. Question 1. What part of this outcome was truly outside my control? This matters because reality is real. Sometimes the timing was bad. Sometimes the system was unfair. Sometimes another person did behave poorly. You do not become wiser by pretending everything is your fault. Question 2. What part of this outcome was influenced by my choices? Not caused entirely by you, influenced by you. That word keeps the question honest. Maybe you did not control the deadline, but you controlled when you started. Maybe you did not control the argument, but you controlled the tone you used after it began. Maybe you did not control the market, but you controlled how much risk you took. Question 3. What would I say if this happened to someone else? This is the symmetry test. If your friend failed the exam, would you accept every excuse? If your coworker made the same mistake, would you still say the system was entirely to blame? If the answer changes when the person changes, bias may be involved. Question 4. What is the smallest lesson I can take without attacking my identity? This is the most important question because the goal is not shame. The goal is adjustment. Maybe the lesson is, I need to prepare earlier. I need to ask clearer questions. I need to stop assuming people know what I mean. I need to check my work before sending it. I need to stop choosing partners based on chemistry alone and then acting surprised when values matter. The lesson should be specific enough to change behavior, but not so global that it destroys self-respect. I am a failure is not a lesson. I need a better system for preparing is a lesson. The healthiest alternative to self-serving bias is not self-criticism. It is accurate self-respect. Accurate self-respect means I can acknowledge my effort. I can acknowledge the situation. I can acknowledge my mistakes. And none of those facts need to cancel the others. You can be talented and still unprepared. You can be kind and still hurt someone. You can be intelligent and still make a bad decision. You can be unlucky and still need to change your approach. Life is rarely clean. Most outcomes are mixed. A little skill, a little luck, a little effort, a little timing, a little personal responsibility, a little chaos. Self-serving bias tries to make the story cleaner than it is. But clean stories are not always useful stories. A useful story gives you agency, not fake blame, not fake innocence, agency. The ability to say, here is what happened, here is what was outside me, here is what belonged to me, here is what I will change. That is how you become honest without becoming cruel to yourself. The next time something goes well, take the credit. But also notice the help, luck, timing, and support that made it possible. The next time something goes badly, notice the unfairness if it was there, but also look for the part you can learn from. Self-serving bias wants to protect your ego, but your ego is not the same as your future. Sometimes protecting the ego protects the problem. The stronger move is not to blame yourself for everything. It is to become the kind of person who can look at reality without needing it to flatter you. That is real confidence. Not I am always right, but I can learn even when I am not. If you want to understand the hidden mental shortcuts shaping your decisions, relationships, and sense of self, subscribe. That is what we study in this series.